Have you ever felt that someone keeps poking where it actually hurts the most? Not the real wound, but basically the wound of being traumatized, stigmatized, even after you've been victimized. Or ever have you felt that the pain of being stigmatized is actually something more even than being victimized? Now right there is the need to build a safe space, especially for those who've been victimized, traumatized and stigmatized of some sort of abuse, harassment, discrimination, prejudice, trauma, or maybe taboos. A space where people can talk, can share, can actually vent out, can seek help and actually evolve over their fears or insecurities or the heavy burden of vulnerability. In this journey of mine, I've come across so many individuals who once victimized have been victims for life, not just because of what happened, but because what happened thereafter. Among the many stories that shook me, I can particularly recollect, or something which has been still haunting me time and again, is the journey of a young girl who was regularly being abused by her own maternal uncle. Too scared, too silenced, but yes, somewhere, bound into the chains of that family honor, she could not speak out. And gradually, one day when she gathered that courage to speak up, instead of receiving that support, she was made to feel ashamed of something terrible that happened to her. And this is what majority of the times happened. In our society, it is the victim who's actually more prone to that judgment than the perpetrator. In so many stories that rarely make headlines, women continue to face abuse and harassment. Sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's brutal. Often it's the form of being approached in inappropriate ways, and ways that reduces the dignity of a woman, because she's considered no less than actually an commodity to be used and just thrown away. And yet in most of these moments, it is what they opt for is silence. Not because they don't feel the pain, not because they don't know that it is wrong. It is because they fear the judgment which would happen thereafter they have, kind of declared that something wrong happened to them. They worry about the questions that they're asked, why was you? Why it happened to you only? What were you wearing? Or maybe is it that yes, you have been inviting such circumstances? Another episode that I can recollect is of a young woman who had been just hopping over jobs. In a duration of 2 years, she kind of switched over 4 jobs, because particularly wherever she went, she felt that yes, there were men kind of trying to approach her. And in that process, she started doubting her own self, that maybe her own body language, she's been giving those cues that she's always available. So many times it is not just her, but many other women start believing that there is something wrong within them only, that somewhere they have been giving that kind of a image or an impression that they are too much available. This fear slowly turns into a self-doubt, and a doubt so sharp that it is actually much more sharper than the real harassment that happened. Many start believing that maybe there is something wrong within them only. And then the society kind of leaves them with no option but to go into acute silence. Silence which is a kind of shield to protect them, but not a choice. I once again came across a woman, a very hard-working individual who was managing at both fronts of home and her duty at work as well. Somebody who would smile through all the adversity, but the real scenario was that she was repetitively being undergoing that violence from her alcoholic husband who was, as it is, into a relationship with his own sister-in-law. So one day when I decided, okay, I need to help her out, and we reached out to the police, and so that maybe we could come to an end to her suffering. When the police came up, she was absolutely into denial, and she said, nothing, just nothing happened. My husband does nothing to me and it's all fine. So later when the police went away and she was questioned why she did not speak up, she was, kind of trembling, and she was crying, and then she said, because very frankly, tomorrow when the world comes to know that it was me who had complained against my husband, I'll not be considered to be a good woman. I'll be specifically doubted to be somebody, who broke her own home, or somebody who deserved this kind of a treatment happening to this. And that day I realized the harsh reality that yes, it is so many women who keep suffering, and just because of that fear of being judged, they don't even speak about their pain. And this has been continuing because, very frankly, our society somewhere puts that stigma onto a woman that if you're asking for help, then it's a kind of a question mark onto your own dignity, and eventually women are forced to not even ask for help. And think about it, if it happens to a man, then the silence gets more deepened, because somewhere our society still accepts that men are not prone to abuse. So suppose that harassment or abuse has happened to a man, then that silence goes never ending. Somewhere men are kind of even questioned about their masculinity, or they have to prove their identity. The world refuses to believe that men too can actually undergo any sort of abuse. So yes, there have been so many lives shattered, not just because of the wrong or the abuse that happened to them, but because of the stigma, because of the shame or the harassment that actually followed on. People have been living that trauma time and again, not just as memories, but as people's reactions, as those whispers, as those judgments, or maybe that deep isolation that they are left in. Society's non-acceptance often traps individuals into mode of denial and self-rejection. Eventually, people kind of get disconnected, they become antisocial, and sometimes they just exist as shadows of what they were once upon a time. So now, yes, my question to each one of you here is, as humans or as humanity, isn't it our foremost responsibility to actually be a support to somebody who's undergoing some pain, some harassment? But we just do the adverse. Right? And that too because of our own biases, because of our own prejudice, because of our own discomfort. It takes a lot of courage actually to extend help somebody and to ask, are you in pain? Can I be of help to you? Right? So rather than actually helping somebody to come out of that disaster or damage, we make it more deepened. Something which went wrong once, we make it a lifelong scar for them. So now, I'm not here to just talk about the problem. We need to work upon a solution. It's high time that we've been raising voices and creating awareness about it. But I think this doesn't, give a foolproof solution. We need to create an entire, community, a collective responsibility where rather than from sympathizing, we make systems to support. Systems which begin from our school level, right, where maybe we create a safe circle which includes a trained set of teachers, certain students, and then we create an environment where people who have gone through some sort of abuse, trauma or harassment can talk about it without any fear of judgment. A space where emotions are heard and not hushed. Right? Where a child learns at an early stage that when you talk about your pain, it is not a weakness, it is actually courage. So, yes, imagine workplaces where mental and emotional safety are given the same priority as physical safety, where HR is just not a policy department but a human response system. Regular sensitization programs, anonymous reporting mechanisms, and peer support networks that can turn offices into communities of care. And within our neighborhoods, we can do so much. If nothing much, we can at least start listening to each other. We can at least be trustworthy elderly. We can be an empathetic friend. We can be a teacher who doesn't shame or who doesn't tell that you cannot talk about your pain, because it's not just drama, it is something which is heartfelt, which is something, deep within. Creating small circles first, and then we can, make it a bigger group where we come together and we talk, we share. We basically, vent out our hearts and speak about that journey of being hurt, being abused, being traumatized, so that at least if nothing else happens, we are able to vent out that pain. as individuals, we can be more responsible with our words, where definitely we need to question that, general prejudice about somebody, or maybe just making a remark or a comment which can be hurtful, which can be damaging, or yes, just being, because I loved it, because, that was fun for me, and I ended up humiliating somebody else. And sometimes speaking becomes the solution, because when you're silent, then also you're actually participating, you're being a member to the wrong. Each one of us has the power to build a safe community, right? Not through grand reforms, but at least we can, be putting those little efforts, those small consistent efforts to be more empathetic. Change will not happen when someone will take the bigger responsibility. Change would happen when each one of us will be a kind of a safe zone for the other human being. I think as simple as that. So the future is envisioned here, where empathy is built into systems and not just restricted to individuals, where schools don't wait for crisis to happen to teach their children how to, that emergency response system, where organizations don't treat harassment as the next highlight. It has to be considered as a human issue, and it has to be dealt sensitively, where every classroom, every organization, every community opens up to those dialogues, those conversations, where there is no inhibition, there is no insecurity, or there is no fear of being judged. So yes, we can no longer rely upon awareness campaigns or responses which are coming up with some corrective action. We need an ecosystem where not just to protect people from harm, but actually prevent the harm, where there is openness, there is transparency of conversations, dialogue, and compassion, where as survivors, when they speak up, they don't feel that yes, people would run away, or then they would be kind of again somewhere stuck into that circle, that cocoon, that yes, you are being judged, where when somebody speaks, they feel that they are being heard. When a child kind of comes up with a problem to a teacher, he or she feels that yes, I've shown courage, I've shown somewhere, strength in telling that if once victimized, I'm not broken for the entire life. When a person begins to heal, the society must not remind them of their scars. They must actually celebrate their strength. So we need to actually all together, collectively, each one of us in our own individual capacity, we need to come together where when somebody speaks the truth, the other believes in it. Other gives them a pat on that, yes, you've shown that courage. And very frankly, where love, empathy, and compassion start operating in the real world, so that we'll be able to end up this fear, this stigma, this non-acceptance, where we choose to listen, believe, and support, if nothing else, at least as humans. We don't just heal one individual, we heal the entire, the system, the community. So finally, I just want to say, whenever next you just, pass on a casual remark, or you just feel like giving, somebody, yes, a comment, think about it. What am I doing? Take a pause. Am I actually helping that somebody to, evolve over that hurt? Or am I deepening that hurt, making it a more traumatizing or a painful experience? Most importantly, as individuals, it's high time. We need to come out of our prejudice. We need to come out of our, that discrimination factor. We need to build in, we need to showcase empathy, compassion in real life. Because where healing begins, the judgment comes to an end. Thank you.